Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch. Welcome back to you too, mate.
Mate, where's the cake? Where's the cake?
Well, you might be a couple of weeks early, but if you're referring to our impending 6th birthday celebration,
I
think there might be a cake. What were you thinking?
Well, I just thought we started in February, and it's February. So, is that the I mean, I like to bring things forward, I like to,
Mate, it's all about delayed gratification on this podcast, mate. We've got to make sure we hit the right date. So, but not only is it our birthday this month, but I've got some phenomenal news to share. That's a little one for you and me.
What's that?
10 million downloads.
No,
we crossed it. 10 million downloads. Can you believe it? So what that means is that our community...
Wait.
You got something in mind?
That me little blower, me little horn there.
Folks, yes, this is a little self-indulgent, but it's just a nice little reflection point for Ben and I, because when we started this podcast, we were called to serve a community of property investors and help them organise and manage their money better. It's been a phenomenal 6 years for us upcoming, but the fact that we reached 10 million, I can promise you without a shadow of a doubt, that felt like an unbelievable pipe dream. And Ben, I must admit, if we could have 10 million portal users, that'd be amazing, because that means that we'd be organising and managing money in less than 10 minutes a month for 10 million people. But also 10 million summer series stories would be pretty cool too. So our movement is very clear, is to help people manage and organise their money better so they can trap more surplus, so that they can actually invest into having some form of lifestyle design funded by a passive income. So, mate, I just wanted to pause and reflect. And again, I understand it's a little self-indulgent, but it's just a significant milestone on what we're trying to do and help as many people as we can.
Yeah, so we're thrilled if you've acted on some of the information that our amazing guests or our, case study success stories that you've heard during the journey. If there's any takeaways that you've been able to act on, that's awesome for us. I mean, at the end of the day, that is what it's all about. So obviously some of the information is being passed on to you and for that purpose to act on it. So if you've been able to move the dial on your financial transformation towards financial peace, then good on you and congratulations, because that's who we're here for.
And we are called to serve this community. We will continue to serve that community, Ben. We're excited about it. But it started off you, me and Stig on the smartphone. The team grew. We got Emma on board. She's been a wonderful part of our community, as well as me, you and the Stig. Yeah. And now we've got Artie as well, who's joined us. So we've grown a little bit over time, but we're certainly excited by what the future brings. Now, when we hit 9 million, we put a little post out to say, we'll try and guess when we hit 10 million. So we will, and the Start and Build course is going to someone who hit that closest to that milestone, nearest the pin.
Little giveaway. Beautiful.
So we'll let you know what that is next week. But exciting. Thank you, crew, for supporting us. We understand now more than ever there is enormous competition for your ears. So we are going to continue to deliver as much quality content as we can so that we can honour your earbuds each and every week. Hey, Ben, you had a pick a webinar on Tuesday. How did that go?
Yeah, we did. Ross Lacane, one of Australia's foremost thought leaders in the mortgage broking industry. He just delivered some gold. Talk about investment savvy mortgage broker. He's your man. So to all those people who turned up, we had 350 registrations. We had a really big showing, but also, it's now it's been recorded. We're editing it in the next couple of days. It will be uploaded. The only way you can get it is if you become a member of our not-for-profit association for property investors or aspiring property investors. So you just need to pay your $5 for your membership or $20 for 5 years. And you'll get access to not only Ross's presentation, but also some of the other experts that we've recorded on our webinar series, because they are on demand in the membership area for our Picker members. So there you go. Thanks, Bryce, for giving me the opportunity to share that info.
No worries. Go and check out that library, folks. It was quality information. You should check it out. Hey, a couple of quick things. Instagram, come and check us out. We're dropping heaps of daily content over there. So if you're an Instagrammer, come and have a look. If you're a Facebooker, come and have a look. There's heaps and heaps of stuff going on. And we are almost at 2,000 reviews on iTunes, Ben. So if anyone wants to nudge us over the 2,000, that'd be great. We'd love to get the feedback and use it. But 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5-star rating. We'd prefer 5. If 1's your jam, that's fine. But come over and let us know what you think. That'd be great. Hey, my Mindset Minute theme today, Ben, before I do that, we're going to set up a wonderful series in the next few weeks.
Little mini series. Yes. Beautiful.
Little mini series. And it's largely around everything you need to know about buying in a hot market, because it is smoking.
I've got some stats coming up in the, what's making property news, which will reinforce that, Bryce. So it is definitely a bit of competition out there. So we're going to try and set you up with the knowledge you need to basically play in a competitive market where there's a lot of experts out there as well who are doing their thing, right? So it's pretty exciting.
And we asked for feedback, Ben, from our summer series, and people gave us a survey. And so we're playing. The reason we set this up is because it's playing into direct feedback that we received from what you want as a community. So we're excited to bring that. So that'll be coming to you very shortly. But before we get there, Mindset Minute, continue the reading of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, Chapter 20. The title is The Movies Do It, TV Does It. Why don't you do it, Ben? So this chapter, more than any of the wow, that's not true, but a lot of the teaching was well and truly in all the examples, and the whole book was the whole chapter was full of examples. So I've just pulled a couple out because otherwise we won't get the principle to land. But you have to use showmanship. The movies do it, television does it, and you'll have to do it if you want attention. So experts in window display know the power of dramatization. So for example, the manufacturers of a new rat poison gave dealers a window display that included 2 live rats, Ben. So the week that the rats were shown, sales zoomed to 5 times their normal rate. So there's a bit of showmanship. There's a bit of dramatization. You can dramatize your ideas in business or in any other aspect of your life. It's easy. Jim Yemens, who sells for the NCR company, i.e. the National Cash Register in Richmond, Virginia, told how he made a sale by dramatic demonstration. Last week, I called on a neighborhood grocer and saw that the cash registers he was using at his checkout counters were very old-fashioned. I approached the owner and told him, "You are literally throwing away pennies every time a customer comes through your line." With that, I threw up a handful of pennies on the floor. He quickly became attentive. The mere words should have been of interest to him, but the sound of pennies hitting the floor stopped him. I was able to get an order from him to replace some of his machines. It works in home life as well, Ben. When the old-time lover proposed to his sweetheart, did he just use words of love? No, he went down on his knees. That really showed he meant what he said. We don't propose on your knees anymore, but many suitors still set up romantic atmosphere before they pop the question. Quick one for you. Did you get down on your knees when you proposed to your dearly beloved?
I actually did, Bryce, and I did it in a pretty incredible little spot. I was very lucky.
I did too.
The highest point of the Great Wall of China.
The highest point of the Great Wall of China. That's a great story.
I had snow around the aspects of it, and I passed the camera over to Jane's uncle, and I said, he had no idea.
Yeah.
Passed the camera. I said, "Can you just take a photo of this?"
Wow.
And I got down on one knee, and I proposed to my beautiful Jane. And
wow.
The rest is history.
Did you have all the tourists sort of mingling around? And
interesting enough, because the highest point is about 3.5 hours out of Beijing.
So you're on your own.
It literally is on one of the turrets there. So you're literally walking, it gets narrower and narrower and narrower. Then it stops, right? Because you're basically up, as I said, in snow country. So it's just amazing. It was sort of an hour trek up to the highest point, and then pop the question.
Oh, nice. I did go on one knee too, Ben. I went up to the Eureka Tower here in Melbourne.
Beautiful.
And it was we're the last people in. The frost, the frost, Andrew and I just in there, the frost disappears, nothing. Yeah. And so I'm down on one knee asking, and they take a photo. They automatically take a photo. So
awesome.
I'd kind of thought, well, if she's fearing for her life at this point, she's probably not going to say no to me. So I was kind of, but so there you go. So principle number 20 here is dramatize your ideas when you're dealing with people, Ben, to garner attention and I guess win friends and influence people is the goal here.
And just a reminder, Bryce, how old's the book? Because obviously when you're hearing cash registers and all that type of stuff, it's like it's the 1920s, 1930s.
Yeah, 1930s. Got a little bit of vintage about it. I think it's 1936 to be exact. So
beautiful.
There you go. Thank you, Dave Carnegie. Lots of wisdom. Hey, everything you need to know about buying in a hot market, Ben. Let's rip in. There is a lot for us to chat about. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it from the context of how would we chat to someone who'd come and sat with us and said, what should I do to make sure that I can navigate this market? But a little bit of backstory. I think it's really important that you can rewind and go back if you haven't already been part of, you're new to us. In the height of coronavirus, we made some statements around, we saw it was a productivity challenge, not a financial challenge. We used an analogy of a car where we said that the analogy was that the government was pumping stimulus left, right, and center into the economy, which was equivalent to someone standing at the back of the car pumping fuel into the car. And then we talked about through the RBA tweaking through fiscal policy, they were tweaking interest rates down to the lowest they've ever been, and they were continually coming down. So you had a fully tuned car and you had a fully fueled car. And the reason it wasn't moving is because people couldn't get to the driver's seat. So you can rewind and you can go and see that. And we said, as soon as people get back in the car, they will continue to drive. Later on, we adjusted that message to say, not only does that analogy still reign true, but the rev meter on the car is actually moving towards red, because there is that much throttle going onto it. There was the analogy of a seagull fighting over a chip. So then now fast forward to where we are now, and all of that has actually come to fruition. And not only that, the people who were the doomsayers during that time have actually adjusted their forecasts to now come in line with what we were saying at the time. So you now have a situation where people have to navigate a market which, to be honest, it's unprecedented, where you've got the level of demand in a property market where we're at. We've had hot markets before, but what's unusual is it's everywhere. It's in nearly every single market across the country, but mainly the major markets are all experiencing this. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the history, where we're at, why we're here, before we even get to the point where we say, how do you navigate it?
Yeah, I mean, we saw home builder incentive programs, renovation incentive programs. The government knows, and Treasury and even some of the bigger bank economists know, for every sort of person that's directly employed in property, another 6 jobs are created. For every dollar that goes into property, $10 are created in the economy. So you knew that the government was going to do something about going households and going property as a means to potentially get through it. So we saw that in terms of those stimulus. Record low interest rates were also a catalyst. Behavioural change as per COVID in terms of high population centres and pushing out to the regions and those types of things also played into that. But now we've got a situation where we really can't travel internationally, and we spend literally $70 billion annually on traveling offshore. All that money is being refined. The sandwich year, the travel year. We've got younger millennials and people like that who are now looking at property as an option, right? And can work from home. So it's created. It's definitely hasn't been investor led yet, but it's definitely created this pent up demand that we're seeing, and people looking at regions and those types of things. And then finally, if you look at where you are getting your return from an investor point of view, we're now starting to see investors saying, well, money in the bank. Yes, I've got shares, but a lot of people like the security of bricks and mortar. And that's why we do have this really large challenge around, this demand that's now starting to flow through, and people are getting in the car, Bryce.
Anecdotally, I've got someone in my wife's family who's coming to me for advice, who during COVID was in a little bit of debt problem. As a result of COVID, going nowhere, got out of, it was only a small debt, but just like some credit cards and those sorts of things. So not only did lockdown here in Melbourne cause them to distinguish that debt because they didn't have anything else to spend their money on, they also built up a nice little surplus that's allowed them to take advantage of the first home owner grant. So they've now put money down, they've got secured a block of land last week, and they're now in the process of buying and building through they're coming down towards me, which gives them a regional incentive and a first homeowner incentive. And it's under the purchase price that allows them to get stamp duty concession, significant stamp duty concession. So so you're right, Ben. It's now created a situation where they didn't actually see themselves in the property market, and now all of a sudden they are. So it's certainly creating demand from places where you wouldn't have thought before COVID.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the perfect level of demand. Like, it is really strong, but it's as Cameron Cusher was saying to us last week, the amount of owner-occupier house and land stuff is definitely spiking and building of houses. What we haven't seen yet is the return of medium and high density stuff. So in terms of the volume of what we can build in terms of freestanding or townhouses and repurposing land, as opposed to building a high rise of 20 stories that we can have, 280 to 300 apartments in one lot, that hasn't returned yet. So, but imagine if you got that in on top of it, right? So the immigration story isn't quite here yet, but when that does come, that'll be an economy that will be moving quite strongly, and employment will also start to move south, and that's a positive sign for the economy overall. So yes, it is definitely in house and land where we're seeing it at the moment, and upsizes, and led by owner occupiers, but the investor is certainly looking around, but they're finally coming to their senses around avoiding the homogenous high and medium density stuff and focusing in on the stuff that actually grows in capital value.
So folks, that's the reason why we are, if you haven't listened to Cameron last week, you should go and listen to that. But there is a reason, there's an objective reason why we're actually where we are now. So what do we do about it? How do we actually navigate this? And that's what the next few weeks are going to be about, where we're going to give you as many tools and techniques and tips as we can, so that you can actually navigate this framework. So ready to kick this off, Ben?
Love it. Let's get started in terms of what is the first thing I need to do, Bryce?
The first thing that you need to do is realize that investing in property is a process, not an event. That's the first thing that you need to do, because the FOMO that has kicked in is real. And I said it last week, the tide is in, and I just the goal is not to get your name on a title. The goal is actually to have a destination that you're going towards, because the analogy that I use is, right now the market is not for the faint-hearted. To use a surfing analogy, when you're learning to surf, you're in the white water and you've got a longer board and you're playing in the safe area. But if you're down here at Bells Beach, only the experienced go out in Bells Beach. You don't go out if you're a beginner or even intermediate. You have to know what you're doing. And so the analogy I want to sort of put here is, the buying market is for experienced buyers. So if you don't know how to navigate the market, you'll either get burnt or you are going to empty your pockets. So that's the backdrop here. But if you just get into this market just because everyone else is getting to the market, that's a problem.
Yeah. And I think in terms of when you're sitting down individually or as a couple and you're trying to work out where you want to put that money, there's a few things that are going to go on, right? You're going to be talking about budget. You're going to be talking about type of accommodation. And that lends beautifully into, if you're new to the community, we talk about a thing called the buyer's decision quadrant, right? And that is, what we're talking about there is usually from an investor's point of view, but even from an owner-occupier's point of view, because ultimately, owner-occupiers should be the price maker and investors should be the price taker. Now, in a market like we're seeing now, you potentially can have some markets that are booming because investors are potentially getting cash flow positive properties. But the buyer's decision quadrant refers to the four main areas of consideration. The first one is price. The second one is location. The third one is land content, because it's land that appreciates over time. And not only do we want to get an income from this investment, we also want to be able to see capital appreciation. And then it is about the quality of the dwelling, in terms of how do we have someone, a tenant happy in that dwelling, its wear and tear, but also you can look at the character and charm of the property in the scarcity element of that particular asset as well. So as you're making these decisions, and if you were, having a professional consultation with us, we would want to understand what your objectives are around the return on investment and what it is you're trying to do. And then you go through that research process, that buying process of being able to fulfill that obligation and that brief.
And you talked about the buyer's decision quadrant. If you're listening on your smartphone now, just zip over to our Instagram page, because we've actually got a graphic that shows you exactly what you just talked about. So you can go there and check that out. And it's been designed in a way that it really lands, because this here is a fundamental part of what you'll be chatting about. And quite often it's a useful framework for us to decipher conversations that people are having with us. For example, someone says to me, I only want to buy a house with some land, and they're so fixed on that you say, well, you're going to be compromised on something. So if you're going to be firmly fixed on that you are going to have a certain plot of land, that's going to dictate the location, because generally your budget isn't fixed. So what it does is it allows you to have a meaningful discussion around price, location, size of land, quality of the dwelling, because it helps people land to go, all right, well, if we've got a mantra, which we've had for 6 years, which is location does 80% of the heavy lifting. Well, if location and price are fixed, therefore you need to be aware that one of the other two generally has to change. And it's really useful to be having these discussions with key decision makers. If you're making it on your own, have it with yourself. If you're making it with someone else, these are really useful discussions to have. And what people will note was when you said, where do we start? I didn't say by going to an online real estate portal, Ben, to start looking for property. We started talking way back at the beginning, going, let's have some meaningful conversations that matter when we get to the destination, because buying property is pretty easy. It's like, there's not much, change the title from one person to another. Like, there's nothing.
Right. If you've got unlimited money, it's very easy, right? But again, if you're trying to get a return on investment, you don't just pay anything, and you don't just buy anywhere, and you don't just, don't not consider these types of questions that we're posing to you right now.
Because we're trying to get you to understand that the more meaningful discussions you have is not what property I should buy. It's, do I have a strategy? Do I know where I'm headed? I've got a mate, Ben, who last week he said, mate, he's a doctor, earns really good income. And he said to me, Bryce, I just want to buy an investment property. I'm like, all right. So I had a chat. We did a little Zoom like you and I are doing now. And he started asking me, should I buy it in my name? Or if I sell it, my wife's name is, she's not earning as much as me at the moment. Therefore, if we sell it, less capital gain. And it was just this random jumble of thoughts, which is fine. I'm not prejudging, but what I'm saying is and this is a term that you've been using a lot lately, so I'm going to pinch it. But if you don't have a North Star, you don't know where you're heading. Well, sure, some of those, like, it could make sense that you put it in your wife's name if you're going to sell it in 3 years. But if we actually haven't got a strategy in place, well, then usually there's multiple ways that you can peel the what is it? Cut the snake, peel the banana. I don't know what the analogy is, but but ultimately the point is, if you don't have a strategy in place. So I said to him, look, I need to know where you're headed, because he lives in the UK. I said, you're going to stay. So here's part of the conversation. Are you going to stay living in Australia? Yes, I am. Great. Therefore, we want to consider holding these assets long term. So let's remove from the discussion whether or not you're going to sell it, because if you're going to stay in Australia and you want to set up a passive income for life, probably the discussion around selling is not something we're going to do. We might pass this on to your heirs. Okay, that was good information. So therefore, if you are the higher income earner, over time, it might make sense to, and I know you know this, Ben, I'm just going through the analogies. It might make sense to put it in your name for maximum cash flow advantages. So all of these conversations we're around are having a strategy. I said, where are we going? Where are we headed? Because then as soon as we do have that North Star, then it's pretty clear what we do from there. So just because the market is hot doesn't ever change the fact that we need to understand where we're headed first.
Yeah, I mean, if you come back to our ABCD principles, Bryce, it is around that type of story, right? So if you're buying for owner-occupied purposes and you want to get some capital growth and make it an investment, then what we're saying rings true. Buyer's decision quadrant is a big part of that story. If you're buying for owner-occupied purposes and it's a pure lifestyle decision, you may decide to buy in a new estate where there's lots of vacant land and you don't really care, right? But that's a conversation you want to have, because in those new estates, usually the land appreciation is going to be a bit more sluggish until the ripple effect occurs. So once you know that from an owner-occupier's point of view, that is going to help you make a more informed decision, because as what was happening with your doctor mate there, Bryce, spinning in his head, I don't know. So until you start to, okay, that's a lock in terms of that goal's a lock, that goal's a lock, the answers become really clear. And I cannot stress this enough in terms of, the thousands of clients that we've helped and literally the hundreds and hundreds of one-on-one appointments that I've had. The moment you articulate your goals and you prioritize those, the light becomes clearer, the passageway becomes clearer in terms of what we need to do to execute on that plan. So sit down and work out what those plans are. Now, from an investment point of view, coming back to our point before, cash flow management, borrowings, having defense, because we can see, pandemics can happen, right? We didn't know they can happen, but they can happen. So, and then it's asset selection. So,
importantly, a strategy is defense, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's totally, it's a plan, right? And that's what you're trying to do. So have an understanding of, the steps that you're going to be taking to be moving forward. And I think that really is what most, aspiring Australians do. They are forward thinking. Their behaviors are relating to that forward outcome. And so that is going to be a big part of you planning to become what you plan to become as part of that story. So I know sort of say, wait a minute, how does that help me in buying in a competitive market? Well, it just means you don't empty your pockets and just buy anything, or you get emotional to or you don't do the fundamental research that you need to do. We don't want this to be a shortcut. One of the things that most people fail in life to do is when the cognitive load gets heavy, they tend to either push it down the track, and that's why a lot of people don't retire financially free, because they want things that are easy. They want to make easy decisions in their life. The ones who put a bit of cognitive effort in or outsource that cognitive effort to professionals are the ones who usually get to that financial peace and that financial freedom, because they've done it sensibly and they haven't burnt cash or made mistakes along the way.
So I just want to give people some insight into, okay, so yep, we're being the fun police at the moment, Ben, because we haven't once talked about how we actually go and buy in this hot market. And like people are thinking, when do you get to the juicy bit where we're talking about property? It's coming, right, folks? It's coming. But it's like when you do those courses, when you do an online course or something, Ben, all of a sudden they go, all right, let's start module 1. What are your goals? Let's go and write there. And you think, oh my gosh, can't we just get to the meat and potatoes? But it's important, right?
These are the meat and potatoes. At the end of the day, happiness comes out of achieving your goals. It's as simple as that.
So folks, I understand we're being a bit of a fun police, but this stuff's important. So I just want to show you that when we, so again, we use my mate's analogy. What happens is that they build a plan based on that North Star. And then what comes out of that strategy is very clear. You should buy a property for this amount of money. The reason that we want you to, let's call it 600, let's call it 800, whatever the number is, right? The reason we want you to buy it at that price point is because we've taken into account where you want to end up, and we've taken into account all of the things that are happening in your life, meaningful things that are happening in your life between now and you reaching your goal. So if you were to spend any more than that, it probably would put pressure on your cash flow. If you could spend any less than that, the compounding growth impact means you probably won't hit your goal. So it gives a price point. It also gives a yield point. So that, because obviously we need to know how to cash flow this. For a lot of people, it's negative yield in the accumulation, early part of the accumulation phase. So we've got a price point, we've got a yield, and we've got a growth figure, Ben. Now, one of the reasons that we like to buy established property is because it has a track record. And so people say, well, okay, what does that growth look? Sometimes it says get something with a historical 6%. Sometimes get something with a historical of 7%. Very rarely do we ask for it to be greater than 7.5%, right? So very conservative. But what that means is we go and see if there's any precedent to support that property can actually achieve that growth. Because if we know what the price is, that's known. We know what the yield is, that's known. And we go with the growth, well, that's a future event. We actually want to use history as a bit of a guide to give us an indication around that, plus apply some science around getting an outperformed result if you do a few key things. So I just want that to land so that people know, yep, what that actually means is it gives us, so therefore you don't end up comparing with your neighbor or your friend who's buying, I'm buying one for $1 million too. Well, I don't give a rip because I only need one for 700 or I only need one for 600. So it gives you clarity and peace of mind around how you play the game in this very hot market because you're very, very clear on the parameters at the outset.
Yeah, that comes back down to the classic piece of what are my cash flows? What can I afford now? And we know that, historical performance is no guarantee of future performance, right? That's well and truly embedded into us. But what we do know is that the land appreciation has been relatively consistent. And every time you get lower interest rates, that value tends to rise. Now, that's no guarantee that it's going to continue to keep rising and it doesn't have any falls. I mean, we saw what happened when, people got ahead of themselves in the Sydney market and a bit in the Melbourne market. We did see some corrections. We've seen some corrections in the Western Australian market, all got to do with supply and demand. So what we're saying there and what Bryce was alluding to is if we have those base metrics, we then overlay that with historical understanding and we see whether a marketplace is tightly held. And that leads us into our demand and supply measures, which is the data and the science around, what that does. And we also believe in terms of with our field research that certain properties have a character and charm about them and an owner-occupier appeal about them. And so when they do come up for sale, they get emotional results. And that's not seen when you're looking at medians. Right. That is not that you only know that when you actually are studying the individual property. It is synthesized when you actually get to a median level. And so when anyone talks about big data, that data is very synthesized, and that doesn't necessarily show up those unique elements of that particular property. So it really does come down to this future thinking, this future pacing, and bringing that future pacing into the now to know what it will be. Because what is the biggest killer of anyone moving forward is procrastination. And the reason why they procrastinate is because they haven't done this bit of work. And so we talk about it as the brief, the buying brief. And if you do this bit of work, your levels of anxiety, will go down, your confidence levels will go up, your ability to see the North Star clearer, your ability to make the invisible visible for you is a big part of that story. Don't just go out and buy anything. So we're gonna, we are stepping through the process that it takes, because what we also see is those people who do rush into it, and we get this feedback. We get people writing into us, don't we, Bryce, who say, I think I've made a mistake. I've done this and I've done this and I didn't do this step. My friends and mates told me that there was great deals going on in this particular location, and I got introduced to a house and land package seller, and he came into my house and he said, look, this thing is going to cost me $26 a week out of pocket. So I just went with it, right? Hence, I didn't engage my cognitive understanding of it. I took an easy road. I took an easy path. They made it sound simple, and that property's done nothing over the last 6 or 7 years. Now, low interest rates, those properties, even in those newer areas, are going to experience a bit of extra demand, and the values of that land is going to increase over this time. It's what happens when the tide goes out, and then understanding where the property market sits in terms of that, because we've seen that in Western Australia. You saw a mining boom, you saw huge population growth, you saw property prices go, rocket up to the second most expensive median marketplace just behind Sydney. And then for the next basically decade, property prices went down 25%. So, there's, again, no guarantees in terms of what we're talking about here. So getting those fundamentals right around a strategy in place, what are you willing to compromise on, thinking about from an investment mindset, what are your returns on investment, focusing on that price point, the growth and the yield based on your particular circumstances. Bryce mentioned it before. I don't care if you've got a mate who is buying at 1.2. If your budget is 600, you're in the game. Your money's working harder for you, and it's relative to your situation, because you've just also discussed about having that second child, or having that first child, and being able to accommodate that as opposed to having to exit out of that situation is going to be important for you.
Exactly. So there's one of the reviews, Ben, I'm just going to truncate it, but stumbled across you guys 2 years ago when it's hooked to me. Unfortunately, I'd already made all the typical uneducated mistakes when buying property. And then it goes on, blah, blah, blah. That's the thing, right? So like the whole podcast started because you and I had a conversation around another one got burnt. So folks, why are we saying this again? Because in a hot market, you can cut corners. In a hot market, you're actually incentivized to cut corners because of the media, because of everyone saying it cost me more. We bought a property last week, 160 groups through, Ben.
Wow.
9 offers at the end of the first open, like 9 offers at the end of the first open. And we were the second highest price and we secured it. And we'll more on that in the next couple of weeks on how we did that. But it is a very, very hot market. So that person had done all this prep work. They knew what they needed to buy, where they needed to buy it, and then obviously engage a professional to do that. So I guess we're setting stuff up. I also want to talk about mindset, Ben, because
I do, but can I just make mention of what's happening? You can hear our voices. Our tone is animated. We're a little bit more emotional than we normally would be. It's almost like we're preaching as opposed to educating. And that is because we care. We absolutely care that if you don't get that bit right, so we're trying to drum that in. We're looking at each other through the power of Zoom, right? But it is because it is a really important step in terms of understanding those elements. And now we're coming into mindset and in terms of the next stage, because this is also important because, we're going to get to the strategy about buying properties and the finance and all of those other things, but this is important stuff.
Yeah, well, the mindset isn't what you'd probably think it is at this point around having a money mindset and making sure you don't have scarcity and all, which that's important. And that is not the topic for today, right? It's too huge a topic for us to even try and cover, other than you need to understand what some of your derailers are, right? But the mindset I want to talk about today is it is a quick market. And in a quick market, you need to have a quick mindset on how you move. Like you have to be ready to pounce. You have to be understanding what is a good property, what's not a good property, but you do not have time to dilly-dally. I'll use that example again. And it's probably not the only example of our team. They're buying stuff on the day of the first open, right? So if you think, go online, have a look at a property. It's open this Saturday at 10:30. And then you go through it and you think, I wonder if, and then you think, I'll take Sunday and I'll talk to my broker on the Monday, and it's gone. Yeah. The property's gone. Like
it went that night. Market, there is no place for acting cool. Where are you, the agent says, are you interested in the property? And you say, no, leave it with me. You are not even going to get that call when the 9 offers have just gone in and the property sold the next day. And you go, damn it, I was interested in that property, but I tried to be clever and play it cool because I wanted them to chase me. You are not going to be chased. We're not talking about Sydney and Melbourne here. We're talking about the whole country. We are talking about regional. I mean, even the regional areas are saying they've never. The agents aren't ringing us like they normally would, saying, we've got something coming. It is just like they're only interested in getting the listings because they already know they have so many buyers that will come in. So their job right now is just to find sellers and get listings because the properties are going to sell themselves. It's a relationship game, and we're going into next week's episode here, Ben. But it's a relationship game right now. It's not a look online and turn up to. It's about relationship. It's about dealing with the agent. It's about understanding how they get paid, Ben. They get paid by getting a transaction facilitated and getting the best response, getting the best result for their client, which is the seller, right? So if you understand that, you know how to play. We're not going to dive into that today. But mindset is, I just want everyone to understand. I'm going to go back to the surfing analogy. You're out in the big waves. You are. If you are in the wrong position when a big wave breaks,
you are going to get stuck. You're going to stay under for a while. Which is the analogy for you. You're probably going to get pantsed. You're going to probably give up too much money.
That washing machine. Yep.
So just the mindset is around being very clear on it is an act quickly market. In most markets that people will be listening to this podcast, most markets, it is a quick market. Doesn't mean you should buy anything. Doesn't mean you should throw money at it no matter what. Like we'll dive into that, but it's just being aware of what a hot market is. The seller has the power, not the buyer.
Okay, so let's now talk about what we've got as we've got a 5-step process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that process has proven itself very, very helpful for thousands and thousands of the clients that we work with. And so we want to also just take a moment to step through those processes. Now, I'll just quickly reel them off: clarify, evaluate, plan, implement, and manage. It's really important that you understand what those things are, because when we'll talk through what they mean, but if you can also, take some notes on this in terms of what are your goals, what are your intentions, and then how do you evaluate that? That's what we're going to work through in this, what we call prep stage.
Right. So let's rattle that off. I think clarify can be easy to grasp, and I'd really love for you to dig into evaluate, because I reckon that's where some ambiguity can live. But clarify is clearly get a brief, work out what you've got, work out where your North Star is, work out what all the miles. So that makes sense. We've got to have a starting position. We've got to know a backstory. We've got to know some details. Any advisor who is worth their salt will know their client, and part of that is through the clarify. What do you want? What have you got? Where do you want to go? So I think that's pretty straightforward, but can you help the community with step 2, Ben? Evaluate.
Yeah, so what we're doing when we're evaluating is we're basically coming into the story around potential and opportunity. So that is where we're starting to play with the components of the household: money in, money out, what's available surplus, where can we look, what can we do around that type of story. So when we get to that stage, we are really starting to look at these types of things. We want to assess and analyze the information inside that household. So it's all down to cash flows in terms of that, because that is going to then set the stage for what you can possibly buy and can comfortably afford. Again, we don't want to get ourselves in too deep, and we want to be sensible about this. So we don't want to create that irrational behavior that I have to move now. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. No, it's not necessarily the case. We're going to assess that situation. So inside your planning and the work that you're doing, you are, once you've collected your financial information and you've set your goals and you clarify, you're then starting to work out how close can I get to those. And that is all around that money management story and how you can execute on that in regards to those values.
Now, for folks listening at home, some resources available for you. We've got plenty of free reports that you can get, but if you want to go to thearmchairguide.com.au, you can actually get a free copy of our book and the frameworks that we're talking about here, the buyer's decision quadrant, also the 5-step process are in that as well. So thearmchairguide.com.
Page 54 is where you start the 5-step process. That's really helpful in terms of the work you're trying to do. And then, Bryce, to finish off evaluation, what I also encourage everyone to do is jump onto the free My Wealth portal, right? The TPC My Wealth portal, because inside the My Wealth portal, we have money stretch. Now, because if you're wondering, I've been talking about cash flows and how it would impact that and future planning. So if you actually use the money stretch tool, you can actually see how that's going to, change the impact or the future direction of cash flow. So if cash flow is still growing and you can add some ideas in there around what you're going to buy, it is an excellent tool to give you some confidence around that. Now, of course, you can go off and see a professional and they can help you in that. But I'm sort of saying, if you want to DIY this, which is what this education and our podcast is about, that is an excellent free tool that you can use to get some analysis around your cash flows. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Now, the next step, Bryce, is plan, right? So plan is number 3. Now, what we're doing there is, because we've done that analysis, we're able to work out what our buying power is, what our borrowing power is, and we're able to then start to think about the return on investment. So the return on investment comes back to what you mentioned before, which is yield and capital growth. So if you have really strong surpluses, then we encourage you to chase what we would consider a capital growth asset. If you have a safe and healthy surplus, then we may chase a balanced asset, which is a combination of a little bit extra yield, but also looking for some capital growth. And if you have small cash flows or small surpluses, I should say, but you still want to get into the property market, you're probably going to be buying at the lower end, but with a better focus on yield. So you're probably looking at yield points around that sort of 5 to 6%. We don't want you going into mining towns, but you may have to go into leisure and lifestyle locations to potentially get some of that higher yield. So that is what the strategy is about. It's sort of understanding, and that's your plan when it comes to executing on the property. When you finish doing that modeling around cash flows, what you're looking at, and as you move into the planning stage and you're building out your plan, you've got concentrations around the impacts on cash flow. So liquidity is king, and that's why we always say cash flow is king around that. And so if you buy a higher priced asset, say let's call it $1 million, the reality is that the yield on that $1 million property means that there will be more out of pocket coming out of the surplus household cash flow. So it's important to understand that. Now that $1 million asset is potentially going to be well located in what we call a knowledge center city. And that knowledge center city has higher prospects of future wage growth, because that's how it works, right? You know, all around the world, your knowledge centers, your financial centers have high income earning, and all of their property, that correlates to property prices. So if we're going to be doing that, that's exactly what we want to be looking at, as opposed to say a $450,000 asset, which can also accommodate a better rental yield, because a $450,000 property, the rent on that property might be at, say, 3.5% yield or 4% yield. That's quite affordable for the vast majority of the marketplace. And when demand is there, you'll see that type of yield. Now, that means less out-of-pocket expenses for the household. So that's what, when we talk about a balanced asset versus a capital growth asset versus a higher yielding asset, what we are doing there is playing with those levers in terms of the out-of-pocket expense when we look at each asset in isolation. So I'll recap that again. Higher capital growth assets will have a stronger input in terms of from your surplus cash flow. A balanced asset will probably see with these low interest rates that property will be around cash flow neutral as opposed to negative geared with a higher asset. And then a yielding asset, a higher yielding asset with these historically low interest rates, could actually be in positive income territory. And so there's less impact in terms of the family budget.
Yeah, I think it's important because the planning goal is around making sure that you've got enough surplus and you've got enough household liquidity. And those two metrics are really summarizing what you were just trying to say there, because that's where the art meets the science around, okay, what price point and what works for one doesn't work for another. And I just really wanted that to land. Yeah,
well, when you're an A grader at this price, this is what happens. You are able to assess very confidently that buying price point. So if you are conservative and you don't do this exercise, but you still want to, you may execute on a $500,000 property because you are conservative, because you haven't made the cash flow visible to you, when you could have probably bought it at 600 level. Mm-hmm. And that's the point we're making. You get compounding return on the asset value. So if that's 6% on 600 versus 6% on 500, that is over the time, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars into your nest egg for retirement. So the people who step up and make the effort of actually doing that analysis well only benefit themselves in greater, financial return.
What's the Goldilocks? Just too hot, too cold, but just right. It's a bit like that, isn't it? Where at one price point it could be too hot, at another one it's too cold. You're not going to get it, but you've got to find it's just right. So step 4. So that's step 3, which is plan. Step 4 is implement. we are going to go through implement in detail in the next couple of weeks. We're going to go through the due diligence. We're going to go through the searching process. We're going to go through how to make an offer. We're going to go through some of the conditions. So implement, we are going to double down on in the next couple of weeks. So step 4, implement, stay tuned for that. Then step 5, Ben, manage.
Yeah. So if I just rounding out, implement, find and deliver. Like if that's how I summarize it, and then number 5 is manage. So one property will not get you to say, call it $2,000 a week, right? So the manage piece has 2 elements to it. It's measure and monitor. And what you're trying to do, and we're not saying you need a heap of properties, we've been very clear on that. 3 or 4 good property assets over a decent period of time is going to deliver you the returns that you're looking for. So what we want to be doing there is focusing in on the benchmarks, checking in on that property and monitoring that. And the best way to do that is money smarts, because we've made a system that you don't have to constantly monitor. You check in once a month, and then you do an annualized program around cash flow. And if you're showing up and hitting those numbers, the property's working in the background to deliver you the outcomes that you're looking for.
Best way I summarize manage, Ben, is when you launch a rocket to the moon. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's on track about 3% of the time. So it needs constant little nudges all the way as it's making the orbit to the moon, right? So that's the best analogy for step 5, manage. You will need these little nudges that just tweak, just to make sure that you're on track, because it's not likely that the plan that you set up today will go 100% unchanged. It might go 89% unchanged, but it's not going to go 100% unchanged. So manage is about tweaking going forward. So there you go, folks. The prep is mindset. We are in the big surf. The 5-step process, what we're going to follow. And then the final part of really setting this up is making sure that you have the right team around you. And for those playing along at home, page 131 of the Armchair Guide to Property Investing goes through this. But let's riff off a couple. First of all, mortgage broker. I don't think anyone who's listened to us for any length of time would be surprised that we think that you should have an investment savvy mortgage broker. Yep, you can go straight to the bank, no problem. Will the bank be able to get you lending? Yep, no problem. But we think if you have an investment savvy mortgage broker, they are going to be able to set you up correctly. Now, stick around for next week because we're going to unpack that a whole heap. But investment savvy mortgage broker. And Ben, this may come as a surprise to you. It may come as a surprise to our community, but wherever possible, if you're swimming in the big surf, you need someone who knows what they're doing. So I don't think anyone would be surprised to hear that I think you should have a buyer's agent on your team, Ben.
I mean, again, if you're going to pay in the pro leagues, I don't know anyone who's in the pro leagues who doesn't have a coach, a fitness instructor, a nutritionist, a dietitian, all of those types of things. So it does make sense. You mentioned it earlier, Bryce, and I know we're going to go into it in this mini series in a little bit more detail, but relationships with agents is going to be critical here, right? And if you're an active buyer and you're going to be buying, 30 or 40 properties over the course of the next year, you're going to have strong relationships with those agents. So I don't want to, again, we're not getting into that now, but so it just makes sense that you would have a buyer's agent in your corner because it's going to give you the edge.
But the caveat here, Ben, and I'll do it, is you don't have to, right? So I don't want this to feel like everyone's been checkpointed into a point where I've said, right, and the only way is a buyer's agent. All I'm saying, the reason I'm saying that is because I think because the context of this is in a hot market, right?
Yes.
We're not talking about a normal market or a buyer's market. We're talking about a hot market. And so, and a buyer's agent, you don't have to always have full service. They might represent you at auction or just whatever, right? But what I'm saying is, I do not want you to be in any illusions that this is a difficult market for the inexperienced. I guess that's what I'm saying here.
Well, there's 2 elements, isn't it? There's the inexperienced piece, but there's also, it's a fast-paced market, right? So if you're a full-time, time-poor professional and you're picking up Friday night and having a look at the new listings and then trying to get your act together for the Saturday, that property might have already been gone or it could have been off market. You have no time to dedicate to that opportunity. So I think from that point of view, it also has an advantage because, it is so fast paced that if you can't dedicate the ample amount of time, you'll be off your board in no time at all.
A buyer's agent gets a call on a Friday night, Ben. Hey, buyer's agent number one, just letting you know that my main buyer on that property tomorrow has bought elsewhere. You should definitely turn up, because I know you weren't turning up, but I can assure you that my main buyer is bought elsewhere. My second buyer said they're not turning up. So you're getting these conversations, Ben, that then you're better prepared. Now, I'm not saying that everything's happening off market. I'm not saying everything's happening prior to auction. We'll talk about that soon. But what I am saying is that there is, I've laboured the point enough. There's a bit in it.
Okay, moving on. Building and pest inspections. No brainer.
No brainer.
No brainer. So you've got to, but don't be one of these people who are like, oh, I love this property now, I've got to find my building and pest inspector. You should have done that homework earlier. If you know your location, you know your budget, then you should have say, okay, well, when I find that property, and they're going to be busy. They're going to be busy, right? So last thing you want is then having to get the B grader or the C grader building and property inspector, because he's the only one available, because all the others have been pre-booked. So potentially introduce yourself. Say, I'm going to be buying in this area. How much lead time do you need to be able to book you in? That's important, right?
I cannot stress what you said enough. Like, we have a panel of building inspectors that we use, and we're constantly checking in. What's your forward booking? When if we've got something this week, can we? Where are your opportunity? Okay, you've only got from 10 to that is.
And we get waivers and favors, right? Because we do volume. But you're absolutely. Again, the average punter on the street is going to go. Who are they going to? Someone who gives them 400 inspections a year versus someone who's giving them one is going to get. So by all means, that's why you've got to introduce yourself and say, look, I've read up on you. I'm really impressed by what you do. Can you, I've got 2 questions for you or 3 questions for you in terms of what do your reports look like? Do I get to talk to you after the inspection so I can clarify a couple of things from you? And, how do I get you? Do I book through your system, or do I ring your mobile, or whatever? Those are the types of things that are just going to be helpful for you as you need to move quick.
First principles. We're buying in a hot market. We're trying to get you to get planned in advance. We're not saying you need to be a buyer's agent who does 300 a year. What we're saying, but if you're not a buyer's agent who does 300 a year, don't leave it to the day before to get it done. So you've got mortgage broker, buyer's agent, asterisk for full disclosure. The builder, then your legals rep. So whether it's conveyancer or a solicitor, depending on your budget, what you prefer, if you like full written contract reviews versus verbals, or you're just happy to make sure there's no red flags. There's a spectrum. Conveyancers obviously generally are usually more cost effective than a solicitor. A solicitor has some access to specialist lawyers if it ever goes pear-shaped. Sometimes conveyancers can be 1 or 2 person shows versus solicitors who have more resource. There's a bit in that as well, right?
There's a gamut. Yeah.
But be clear on who that is, so that because the contract needs to be reviewed. Oh, and the only thing, sorry, Ben, I just thought that I was going to say about and we're probably going into the weeds here, that with the builder, in some states right now, when you do make it subject to, because in Melbourne and Sydney, you don't make it subject to building inspection, right? No. But in Brisbane and in Adelaide and in Perth, right now you want to be making auction offers. Little teaser of what we're going to talk about.
What's coming in the next couple of weeks.
But so just something like that. So
there's a mandatory one in there for legals though. Getting back quickly there, you must get the contract vetted. I mean, I don't care. It's a 101. It's the only thing that's important is pre-vetting of the vendor statement or the contract or whatever it is in your city of interest. Because you've got 66 Ws are probably going to have to be executed and all of that in New South Wales. So just make sure you have that legal person ready to go, because again, you're going to need to move quick.
More on that later. So you've got the builder, you got your legals rep, clearly property manager. The reason I say property manager is this early, because you kind of think I'm not ready for buy tenant, but because the property manager is a very useful source of intel. Talk to sales agents, they've got an agenda around getting an outcome, which is a sale. Talk to a property manager, they've got an agenda around being able to find a tenant. Yep. And they're 2 different pieces of information, and you should use both.
Yep.
The last 3 are a qualified property investment advisor. We've talked about that for a plan. These aren't necessarily right now for a hot market, because they're not how you navigate the hot market, but up the ground, we've already talked about that. And of course, having a financial planner and an accountant on your team as well. Not necessarily in a hot market, but they are part of the defense and part of the strategy up the ground.
Yeah, I think that if you're having trouble with understanding what your goal setting is and your briefing, please use someone who is a qualified property investment advisor or a property advisor, you know, not necessarily someone who's about buying property, but who knows the numbers. So hence go to your accountant or someone just to assess, you know, in terms of the impact of negative, positively gearing, or what that looks like for you. That's the upstream prep that you need to do. And as I said, the other upstream prep, that if you're having trouble in articulating your goals and prioritizing your goals, having that accountability partner that can help line that up for you, very valuable.
There you go, folks. Everything you need to know to buy in a hot market today. We've talked about just setting the scene as to why we think, well, not actually why we think, why we know we're in the position where we are in a hot market. So it was a refreshing of the things we're talking about in the depths of coronavirus. And then we obviously talked about the brief around how we set this up and also the prep that needs to be in place. So Ben, I'm excited about the next few weeks as we roll this out to help our crew, help our community get themselves ready to buy and get ready to play in the big surf.
Well, sneak peek, there's the due diligence piece. We're going to be talking about finance. There's the search element, which is obviously, you know, the funnel that we talk about in terms of you move from a global nationwide search being borderless down into actual locations and then into property areas. So that's coming. Then we're also talking about offers and negotiations. And so, yeah, we're really excited about this little mini series that we're putting together. It's just the perfect timing to be listening to this education because it'll give you an edge.
Hey folks, if you know someone who is in the market right now and they need to hear this, can you share it with a friend? That'd be super, just to let them know, get them prepped, get them ready. And as I said before, if you need to get a copy of some resources, we have heaps of free resources. We might put a couple in the show notes just to help you with that. There's plenty over on Instagram as well, on Facebook. But you can get our book at thearmchairguide.com.au. You go and get it. It's a free copy. We'll pay for it. If you pay for the shipping, we'll send it out to you. That is a bestseller. You can check that out. Hey, Ben, I reckon that has that's a good start. I reckon next week we are really going to dive into some weeds on a lot of the detail to prep people. But I reckon that was really, really important to have that today. My life hack today is I've reflected. I had this chat with you during the week, and I know that during the year it's coming up for you. So, but clearly we were camping around Tasmania.
Yep.
In our camper trailer, right? So rookie error. I reversed into a caravan spot on a caravan park, and all of a sudden my wife goes to me, "You know that's a widow maker, don't you?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She goes, "That gum tree there, that's a widow maker." And I go, "Well, do tell." Branches drop, hurts people, and looked a few stories. And I'm like, well, no, that wasn't on my radar, but it's 7:30 now, PM. It's the only spot in the park. And so help me flow this through. What does this mean? She goes, well, I'm just letting you know. I said, all right, I'm prepared to sleep at that end of the camper trailer and you're sleeping at the other end because we were top and tailing with the boys.
So you're going to, you know, she's going to be the widow.
Well, there's nothing more when she's raised the concern, there's nothing we can do about it. What else can I do other than to say, hey, look, all right, I'm prepared to take that. Right. And she goes, no problem. I'll sleep this end. I'll tell you why in a second. But she said, no, I'll stay at that. And I'm thinking, hang on a second, what's going on here? You just said it's I found out there was a little foam mattress on top of what she was sleeping. She didn't want to give that up, but she didn't want
a little bit extra.
Didn't want to tell me, right?
Your comforts, eh?
So okay, no problem. So I'm at the other end, right? So I fall asleep that night. First time rain, and it hacked down. Lightning show, hacked down with rain. No problem. Thought, oh, we're really going to test ourselves here. Get to sleep. About 5:30, I wake up out of a deep sleep, and the whole trailer just shook violently. Right. So naturally I've gone to sleep thinking about widows. So then all of a sudden I've woken up out of a deep sleep and I've gone, oh no, I've got to become a widow. So I've jumped out of bed and then I realized I was sleeping next to Jack. He hasn't moved a single bit. And then I look over where Andrew and Sam are. They haven't moved. I'm thinking, oh, I must have imagined. I thought, no, it shook. So I look out the window and what I'd realized is the annex had collapsed, snapped the poles
under the weight of
under the weight of the water that had pooled, right?
That's pulled up on top of that.
So here's where I get to my life hack, right, for all the campers and stuff. And all the experienced campers are probably just going, mate, you numpty, right? But it was the maiden voyage with the camper trailer, right? So what I hadn't done is I had the annex angled at a point, but not enough. Yeah. So it had pulled all this water. So for those folks who are listening to this, they're going camping this weekend, they've been camping, they've got to just make sure that you actually use some common sense, a little bit more than I did, around the gravity component of the rain, because it was on an angle, but it wasn't on enough. So there you go. Good. Tales of the Tassie travels, Ben. But I thought it was a funny story.
Now the annex was off at the repair shop, so nothing wrong with that.
What's making property news?
Well, I just saw it in the theme that we're talking about here, and on the back of Cameron's great chat last week, Cameron Cusher from REA Group. The latest stats are. This is why we're having this conversation and why we're doing this mini series. In terms of here's the change in a percentage term in terms of sales in the first 6 weeks of 2020 versus the first 6 weeks of 2021 by state. New South Wales has had 23.7% increase in sales in the first 6 weeks of this year. Victoria, 41.3% increase in sales in the first 6 weeks.
Makes sense, because the agents were trying to play a bit of catch up too from last year.
Maybe, yeah. 37% in Queensland, 26% in South Australia, Western Australia 40%, Tasmania 3.5%, interesting, not very much at all. Northern Territory 84.5%. If it keeps that run rate, there'll be no properties to buy in Darwin, or because there's only about a couple hundred at any time. ACT 14%, but overall nationally 31% increase in the first 6 weeks of sales. That's why we're saying the demand is evident out there. So we are going to arm you not only with today's show, but in the coming episodes with what you need to do to have an edge and win in this very competitive hot market.
And we're in the next couple of weeks, we're going to address what happens if it keeps on going up too, Ben. We're going to talk about that as well, which is...
we want some feedback too, so get on the socials, and if you've got any questions about this particular topic, then we can hopefully, blend them into, each show, which is exactly what we want to do.
Exactly, folks. So there you go. We are going to set you up so that you are prepared to tackle the big surf. So next week, we're going to bring you some more. But until next week, Ben...
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
See you next week, folks.
Hey there, folks. Bryce Holdaway here. Before you go, if you're new to our community and only listen to maybe a handful of episodes, I thoroughly recommend that you go all the way back to episode number 1, where we unpack all of the foundations when it comes to property investing. Now, for those of you that might be a little bit time poor, I've got good news for you. We have a binge guide that you can download straight away, which summarizes the first 20 episodes where Ben and I unpack the foundational pillars of the A, B, C, D, and so much more. And you can get that straight away. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20, you can download it and consume it whenever you want. It's completely free and available now. And for those of you, just a quick reminder that nothing we've spoken about today constitutes financial advice. We recommend that you reach out to your licensed professional advisor so that you can look at your unique circumstances before acting on any information. Now don't forget, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20 and get your binge guide today.